Nothing is random. This appeared because you're about to break through. If you clicked this, if your eyes landed on these words and something inside you stirred, that was not a small coincidence. Not in the way you usually label things random and then move on. There's a quiet signal in moments like this, a tension aligning with possibility, a doorway opening, an old pattern noticing a new path. I don't say that lightly. I say it because the arrival itself is part of the story I want to help you recognize. The world is more pliable than most of us have been taught to believe, and your presence here is a marker of readiness. Before we go deeper, one quick thing. If this feels like it landed at the right time, type "ready" in the comments, or name one signal you've already noticed in your life, a synchronicity, a dream that returned, a shift in how people respond to you. Do that now. This is a small, practical first step toward making this moment an intentional one. What I'm about to offer you is part explanation, part invitation, part practice. I will use an image borrowed from physics because it helps clarify what I mean when I say attention shapes possibility. I will also rely on stories, mine and the kinds of stories I've seen again and again in the lives of people learning to observe deliberately. And finally, I'll give you tools you can use today to begin shifting from automatic witnessing to conscious creation. The scientific image I borrow is the double-slit experiment. You may have heard of it. A beam of light or particles is sent toward a barrier with two narrow openings. On the far side, the pattern that emerges depends on whether the system knows which slit the particles pass through. When no measurement is made, the particles behave like waves, producing an interference pattern, a sign that many possibilities were present at once. When a measurement is made, the pattern changes. The wave-like behavior collapses into particle-like behavior. In simple terms, the way the system is observed correlates with different outcomes. Scientists interpret and debate the implications. Some see the experiment as opening deep questions about observation, knowledge, and what it means to measure. Others caution against leaping from the behavior of photons in a lab to sweeping claims about human intention and physical reality. Both responses are important. So I use it as a metaphor, an elegant, scientifically grounded metaphor, rather than a laboratory proof that every thought instantaneously rearranges the world around you. Think of it as a model. Under certain conditions, how something is observed correlates with how it behaves. What we do with that model is the heart of this conversation. My claim is not a scientific certainty in the strictest sense. It is an experiential proposition. It says attention matters. The way you witness the world is a variable. It shifts probabilities. It collapses possibilities into reality, sometimes subtly, sometimes rapidly, sometimes in ways that require patience to see. Now notice how easy it is for that to go unnoticed. Most of us live under the assumption that observation is a passive act. We think of attention as a camera, recording whatever life serves up. But attention is not a mere recording device, it is a participant. The problem is that much of our observation happens unconsciously. The act of consciously noticing, of becoming aware of the awareness itself, is rare. And when it does happen, people often misread it as luck, prayer answered, karma, or coincidence. We like tidy explanations that keep us from changing our habits. Here is the core tension. There is nothing mystical about the fact that human beings are conditioned. Survival wiring, cultural lessons, emotional triggers, routine, and the belief that one observation doesn't matter all combine to make our observation a reflex more than a choice. That reflex tends to collapse the same waveforms over and over, producing a life that looks dangerously like fate, but is actually habit. Let me walk you through 5 layers that most commonly turn our observation into an autopilot. I want you to read each one and feel whether it rings true. These aren't abstract categories. They're the lived architecture of habit. 1. Survival conditioning. From infancy, our nervous systems learn to prioritize what keeps us alive. That includes attention patterns. If a child learns that safety requires watching for disapproval, they will become exquisitely attentive to the expressions of others. If a teenager learns that vigilance equals survival in a chaotic home, their attention will default to scanning threats. Survival wiring is brilliant. It protects, but it can also fossilize into attention habits that keep us locked in reactive loops. In adult life, this shows up as automatic fear of loss, an instinct to expect rejection, or a chronic scanning for danger that shapes what we notice first and best. 2. Cultural teaching. We are taught to see the world through the lenses our culture hands us: merit, shame, scarcity, status, success. These lenses act like colored filters over perception. If your culture taught you to equate worth with productivity, you will notice your output more than your inner state. If scarcity is the cultural story, chances and offers will seem rarer.
Cultural narratives don't have to be overt slogans. They are the background music of perception that determine which frequencies your attention will pick up. 3. Emotional filters. Trauma, grief, unresolved hurt, these layer over perception like tinted glass. When a particular emotional wound is active, it colors every incoming signal. A casual remark becomes proof of abandonment. A neutral gesture becomes threat. Emotional filters are efficient. They help you respond quickly by amplifying signals that match past pain.
But efficiency in service of the past becomes a prison when it repeatedly collapses present possibility into patterns carved by previous wounds. 4. Autopilot addiction. Modern life trains us to live on automatic. We binge, scroll, commute, perform. Habits conserve energy. The brain loves shortcuts. The danger is that attention itself becomes autopilot. You move through relationships, work, and moments with the same internal script, and nothing new gets space. Autopilot is comfortable. It keeps you from feeling dizzy with choice. But comfort is not the same as alignment. When attention is on rails, it keeps producing the same outcomes because it keeps collapsing the same waveforms. 5. The belief that one observation doesn't matter. This is the smallest and most insidious of the layers. Many people assume their noticing is irrelevant. I'm only one person. What I think won't change anything. That belief is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you scout the world assuming your observation is noise in the field, you won't pay the kind of attention that shifts things. The pattern repeats and your tiny impact remains tiny. The truth is that observation is cumulative. Simple acts of attention, held consistently, begin to reorient the field around you. Do these layers feel familiar? For almost everyone who begins this work, at least 2 of these will be fingerprints on their experience. The important thing is not to judge yourself for them, but to recognize them as structures that were useful once and that can now be loosened. When observation is unconscious, outcomes tend to feel inevitable. You find yourself reacting, not choosing. Doors close because you expect them to. Opportunities pass because you move with the tired rhythm of a story you've already read. You live downstream from patterns you didn't choose. That is the problem. Recognition is the doorway. So what does conscious observation look like? It looks like noticing. It looks like a slight pause, a deliberate bend of attention, a willingness to hold a moment without instantly folding it into the old narrative. When you begin to observe with choice, you separate the signal from the filter. You see what's actually happening rather than what habit predicts. That's not easy. Habits are persuasive. They will cloak themselves in logic, in history, in this is how things are. But the capacity to observe with intention is also yours. It's not some exotic talent reserved for mystics or quantum physicists. It's a human skill, trainable with daily practice. You may already have hints that this faculty is waking up in you. There are signals, subtle, often overlooked, that tell you attention is changing. Over time, I collected a list of these signs because they are the best early confirmation that something new is operating. They are not guarantees of outcome. They are indicators that the interior landscape of observation is shifting. Notice them like small lights along a path.
Here are the signals I watch for, and that you can watch for too. 1. Synchronicity multiplying. Coincidences that feel too meaningful to ignore. The same theme appearing in conversation, a book landing in your hands, a stranger saying exactly what you needed. Synchronicities become more frequent when attention begins aligning with certain possibilities. They are like knocks on a door you have started to open. 2. Reality responding differently. People mirror your tone more readily. Obstacles soften in unexpected ways. Small windows appear where before there were walls. This is not magic in the sense of instant wishes fulfilled. It's a subtle reconfiguration of behavior and circumstance that often feels like the world is recalibrating around a new register of attention. 3. A shift in memory, or the sense that the past rearranged itself. You may notice different recollections surfacing, or you may find your interpretation of past events softening. Sometimes the future shows itself with unusual clarity, not a prophetic map, but a felt orientation, a pull towards certain possibilities. 4. Decreased reactivity. You notice you respond with less charge. A comment that used to trigger you now lands like a harmless pebble. This is not numbness, it's emotional resilience. When your inner weather calms, you have more space to observe and to choose. 5. Others reflecting something new back to you. Strangers or loved ones begin to refer to you in ways that match your new stance. They treat you with different expectations. This is not manipulation, it's reciprocal recalibration. People orient to the energy you bring. 6. Dreamlike fluidity. Life starts to feel less heavy, more pliant. Time stretches and compresses in ways that feel like the edges between moments are softening. You may experience lucid dreams or repeated motifs in your sleep that seem to be working through internal shifts. 7. Immediate resonance with certain words or images. You read a line, hear a phrase, or see an image, and it lands in your body like a key fitting a lock, an instant recognition. That ah inside you is a signal that your internal map is updating. 8. Small, testable shifts that are replicable. Traffic that clears when you hold calm attention. A short conversation that opens more than expected. A financial opportunity that comes with less struggle. These micro-experiments matter because they teach you the rhythm of notice, intention, response. Each of these signals deserves its own attention. They are not proof that destiny has changed. They are data points about how your field of attention is interacting with the world. The tendency is to either dismiss them as coincidence or to seek dramatic proof. Both responses can stall you. The wiser path is to assemble a series of small, repeatable experiences and then let the pattern speak.
I want to anchor all of this with a small, honest story from my own life, not as a flashy miracle tale, but as a lived experiment that shaped the way I teach. The story begins in a hospital room. I had been in and out of hospitals enough to know the scripts: white walls, the slow click of machines, the small rituals of shift changes. This time I was there after a procedure that left me quiet and readable. The days around the surgery were thick with routine: medication schedules, nurses with practiced efficiency, doctors moving through doors like they were following a choreography. I was tired in the bone and very used to my inner operating system running on autopilot: worry, cataloging worst-case scenarios, rehearsing old anxieties. On the third night, something shifted. It didn't feel like a grand revelation. It started as an instruction to myself. Notice noticing. I gave myself a small, modest task. Watch the ceiling fan for a breath, then watch the sensation of watching it. I didn't set out to bend medical outcomes or perform a miracle. I simply wanted to see whether attention, when trained, could change the texture of experience in a context where I felt powerless. What happened next was a series of small, subjective changes. My reactivity softened. Nurses who had seemed brusque began to offer different gestures: a moment longer at the bedside, a tone that felt more present. Pain registered differently in my body. It did not vanish, but it arrived with less panic and with more tolerable edges. Sleep shifted from fragmented to deeper fragments. Dream content changed, and the whole atmosphere in the room. I tell you this not to imply that attention cured illness. I did not walk out of that room declaring that observation had robbed me of pathology. I tell it because in that room I learned that attention changes experience, that it alters behavior, tone, and the reciprocal field between observer and observed. After that night, I turned the hospital room into a laboratory. I did tiny experiments, noticing the color of the soap dispensers, greeting people with a different posture, holding curiosity instead of default fear. I watched how people responded. I logged the outcomes. Over days and weeks, a pattern refined itself. Deliberate observation shifted behavior in replicable ways, not always traumatic, not always immediate, consistent enough to be instructive. This personal experiment taught me two critical things. First, conscious observation is not special pleading. It is a skill. It can be trained like any other. Second, changes in attention often precede physical evidence. The inner arrangement, the collapse of probabilities at the subjective level, moves before the external world aligns in visible ways. There is a lag. The seed is sown before the plant emerges. That lag can be excruciating for people who expect immediate visible proof.
But in my experience, patience and steady practice are the scaffolding through which inner shifts become outwardly manifest. At this point, you might be wondering, if attention can be trained, how do you begin? How do you stop letting those 5 layers hijack your noticing? What are the simple daily moves that build new perceptual muscles? I will give you concrete keys and numerous micro-exercises. But first, I want to pause and underscore a practical truth I see derail well-meaning seekers again and again. People often try one grand move, a visualization, a prayer, a weekend retreat, and then return to the old habits expecting different results. Transformation is cumulative. It is the small, steady alignments of attention that create durable shifts. Before I hand you the keys, let me extend the sense of urgency in a healthy way. This moment, the fact that you found these words, is a catalytic edge. The title of this message is not rhetoric. Nothing is random. This appeared because you're about to break through, means that your attention is already tilting and the field around you is beginning to respond. There is an opportunity here to practice with intention rather than drift through the same unconscious patterning. In the next section, I will give you 7 practical keys, clear, repeatable practices you can use daily. Each key will include a micro-exercise you can try immediately. We'll also map out how to track quantum lag, that patient window between interior collapse and visible manifestation, and how to keep faith in the practice without becoming attached to specific outcomes. We'll look at collective dimensions too, why your individual practice matters to the field around you. And we'll do an activation exercise together so you can feel the difference between automatic looking and deliberate observing. But before we move into practice, I want to invite you to test something small right now. Find an object in the room, a cup, a picture frame, a plant, a door handle, something ordinary. Hold your gaze on it for a moment and note the story your mind tells about that object. Is it useful, dull, threatening, familiar? Then shift. Watch the object without the story. See it as if for the first time. Notice color, texture, edges, shadow, the way light rests on it. Then notice the difference between the two ways of looking. This is a tiny experiment, but it shows the mechanics at work. The first glance brings the object into the field according to habit. The second glance allows attention to be an instrument of discovery. These two modes of seeing, reactive and curious, are the fulcrum of the whole practice. As you try that small exercise, keep in mind the signals I listed. If you are noticing any of them now or recently, a synchronicity, a softening of reactivity, a dream motif, write it in the comments. That early step anchors this moment into your life. Tiny public acts of commitment have power.
Writing ready or naming a signal is not performative. It's a small activation that echoes the internal recognition you're already feeling. We are at a hinge. The explanation has been given. The diagnosis is clear. The field is indicating that something is possible. What remains is practice, samples that will allow you to test your power to observe and to see how reality begins to respond. We'll also explore that persistent tension called quantum lag and the discipline that makes trust possible. For now, breathe and hold the recognition. This wasn't random. Your attention brought you here. You are nearer to a breakthrough than you may have permitted yourself to believe. Now, let's move from recognition into practice. You already felt the hinge. Now we teach your hands how to open the door. The next sections are the 7 keys you can use every day to make observation conscious. Each one described, then given multiple micro-exercises and simple ways to test it in ordinary life. These are designed so you can begin immediately and scale them into a daily habit. Remember, none of this promises instant miracles. It promises a method, an apprenticeship in attention. And every apprenticeship asks for patience, curiosity, and repetition. Key 1. Catch yourself. The practice of interruption. The first muscle you need is interruption. Not violent disruption, but the gentle habit of catching your attention in the moment it goes automatic. Think of it as installing a soft alarm inside your nervous system that says, pause, notice. To build it, use 3 kinds of micro-practices. First micro-practice, anchor checks. Choose 3 moments in the day, a morning ritual, a lunch break, and before bed, and at each moment ask a single question. What am I noticing right now? Answer in 1 sentence. This is not a self-criticism session, it's data collection. Notice whether your answer names an emotion, a thought, a bodily sensation, or an external detail. The more you catch the pattern, the faster the nervous system learns to pause. Second micro-practice, interrupt triggers.
Identify one repetitive trigger in your life, an email notification, the sound of the kettle, a recurring thought, and train it to be your friend. When the trigger happens, take one breath and name aloud a neutral descriptor. Thinking, worrying, planning, hungry. Naming collapses reactivity into observation. It switches the brain from being swallowed by content to becoming curious about the content. Third micro-practice, micro-retrospectives. At the end of the day, spend 2 minutes logging 3 moments you caught yourself that day. They can be tiny. You noticed you tightened your jaw. You named surprise. You laughed instead of bristling. These entries are the scaffolding of change.
Over time, you will see clusters, certain situations where you default, certain people who pull you into old scripts. That map is invaluable. How to test it? Try this during a normal conversation. When you feel the impulse to defend or one-up, catch it by first taking a breath and silently naming the urge. Watch what happens to the tone of the interaction. You will not reliably transform every relationship overnight, but you'll start to collect instances where interruption opens space for a new response. Key 2. Observe without filters. The practice of filterless seeing. Filters are efficient, but they also constrict. This key trains you to look in a way that suspends the narrative overlay, the story you habitually bring to what you perceive. First micro-practice, the object experiment you already tried. Make it more formal. Each day, pick a mundane object and spend a full minute looking at it without thinking of its use or history. Note texture, color gradients, microshadows, the way dust gathers. If the mind slips into story, this used to be my grandmother's cup, gently return to sensory detail. Over days, noticing sensory detail will become a gateway into less reactive perception. Second micro-practice, relational clean slate. In a brief interaction, the barista, the mail carrier, a colleague, practice meeting them as if you know nothing about them. Notice posture, cadence, micro-gestures without adding immediate character judgments. You may be surprised how often your assumptions are wrong and how often the person responds to your curiosity with a different quality of presence. Third micro-practice, the mirror test. When you look at your own reflection, practice seeing without commentary. Notice the light, the breath on the skin, the movement around the eyes. Resist the pull toward evaluation. This is a radical act of kindness. It loosens the filters that make you reduce yourself to a single load-bearing story. How to test it? After a week of practicing filterless seeing, compare how often you react with habitual narratives, defensive, shame-based, anxious, versus responding with fresh curiosity. Keep a simple tally if you like, reacted and observed columns. Patterns will emerge. Key 3. Cultivate curiosity, the practice of beginner's mind. Curiosity is the engine of conscious observation. It dissolves certainty just enough to allow novelty in. First micro-practice, 2 questions. Replace automatic explanations with 2 questions. What if I don't know this? And what am I missing? Ask them when you feel the old script tighten. These questions open perceptual space and invite new data. Second micro-practice, the exploratory walk. For 10 minutes, it could be 5 at first, walk with an assigned curiosity. Find 3 textures you hadn't noticed before, locate 2 buried sounds, identify 1 scent. Do this with the posture of a child investigating a new toy.
Curiosity loosens the habitual eye and trains attention toward richness rather than threat. Third micro-practice, the curiosity conversation. In a relationship, instead of offering a corrective opinion right away, ask a genuine, open-ended question. What was that like for you? Or, when you say that, what do you mean? Notice how often this invitation produces something alive and new. How to test it? Replace 1 instance of complaining or certainty in a day with a curiosity question. See how quickly the energy of the situation shifts. Curiosity rarely closes doors. It invites them to open. Key 4. Observe the observer, the meta-practice. This is the heart of the work, noticing not only what you notice, but noticing that you noticed. It's the aware of awareness move, the clearest lever for collapsing old probabilities and trying new ones. First micro-practice, the 5-second check. Throughout the day, ask, who is looking right now? Say it to yourself as if you were describing an actor, the critic, the child, the protector. Give the observing voice a short descriptive name. Then ask, what does this observer want? Answer briefly. This naming creates a distance that allows choice. Second micropractice, witness breathing. When you breathe naturally, let one part of your mind stay as the watcher and another part feel the breath. If you can hold that dual awareness for a breath, you are practicing the capacity to observe the observer. Expand it gradually. Hold 2 breaths, 3 breaths. The hold doesn't need to be long. It needs to be consistent. Third micropractice, switching chairs. Mentally shift perspective to different chairs in the theater of your mind. The anxious chair, the hopeful chair, the practical chair. Listen from each seat for a moment. Notice which seat dominates in different contexts. This practice trains cognitive flexibility and makes it easier to choose which observer to rely on when you need to. How to test it? In a moment of stress, feel the impulse to react. Then ask, who is pushing me right now? Name the observer. Then ask, is this observer serving my highest interest in the situation? The few seconds you gain will often allow a different response. Key 5. Choose what to observe. The practice of directed attention. Choice is power. If observation collapses possibilities, then choosing where to place attention is like choosing which seed to plant. First micropractice, the 2-minute shift. Select a small slice of your day, waiting in line, sitting at your desk, walking to the car, and set an intention for what you will observe. Warmth, conversations, opportunities, abundance, safety. Keep your intention simple and repeat it silently before the moment. Notice how the quality of the moment changes. Second micropractice, corrective redirection. When you catch yourself fueling a story that drains you, scarcity, blame, past shame, deliberately choose to observe a countervailing detail.
For example, if you start tallying losses, switch to observing 3 small gains that day. The aim is not to fake positivity, but to rebalance your field of attention away from automatic negative bias. Third micropractice, attention portfolio. Create a small list of attention allocations for the week. Today I will practice noticing generosity. Tomorrow I will notice how people offer help. The next day I will notice synchronicities. Rotate these foci regularly. Over time you will discover which attention investments yield surprising dividends. How to test it? In 1 week, actively choose what to observe for 3 distinct segments of your day. Compare the outcomes, and note whether people and circumstances responded differently to your chosen focus. You are training the muscle that directs collapse. Key 6. Intention setting. The practice of clarifying aim without attachment to the means. Intention is not demanding outcomes. It's aligning your attention and energy towards a chosen possibility. It's the engine that gives your observation direction. First micropractice, sentence intentions. Replace vague wishes with precise present tense sentences. I am opening to clearer communication with Carla. I am practicing calm in small inconveniences. Speak these sentences aloud in the morning. The act of naming sharpens the field. Second micropractice, micro-intentions. Before small actions, set a brief intention. Before sending an email, intend for clarity and ease. Before a call, intend for listening more than persuading. These tiny intentions prime both your nervous system and the environment you enter into. Third micropractice, ritualizing intent. Anchor your daily intention to a simple ritual. Gaze at your hands, touch your collarbone, or place a stone on your desk as you state the intention. Ritual turns volition into embodied anchor points. How to test it? Pick one specific relationship or project and set a sentence intention for a week. At the end of the week, observe what changed in tone, options, or responses. Document small wins and surprising shifts. Intention rarely forces specific outcomes, but it often rearranges the trajectory. Key 7. Non-attachment. The practice of letting go of specific outcomes. Non-attachment does not mean passivity. It means holding possibility without clutching the form it must take. It's the heart of steady persistence through quantum lag. First micropractice, the soft release. After you set an intention, practice one small release. Literally exhale and imagine the outcome as a feather you place on the river instead of a stone you clamp in your fist. This is not resignation. It's psychological safety for patience. It reduces the reactive energy that often blocks emergence. Second micropractice, the alternate route inventory.
When you have a desired external result, a job, reconciliation, funding, map 3 alternate possible pathways that would still lead to your underlying goal: security, presence, creative expression. This widens your field of possibility and prevents obsession with a single timeline. Third micro-practice, gratitude practice for process. Each night, name 3 things the practice taught you that day, whether or not results appeared. Gratitude is an amplifier of non-attachment because it rewards the inner shift rather than insisting on external proof. How to test it? When a desired result does not arrive on your timetable, use the soft release breath and then record one lesson learned that the delay taught you. Over months, you will see that non-attachment produces less collapse into desperation and more resilience. Putting the keys into a rhythm. Theory without rhythm is brittle. To make these keys habitual, weave them into a daily practice that fits your life. Here's a sample week to get you started, a scaffold you can adapt. Each day, pick one key to emphasize while maintaining micro-checks for the others. Keep a short log, what you practiced, what you noticed, and one actionable insight. Smallness breeds sustainability. Monday, catch yourself. 3 anchor checks and a micro-retrospective. Tuesday, filterless seeing, object experiment, and relational clean slate. Wednesday, curiosity, exploratory walk and curiosity conversation. Thursday, observe the observer, 5-second check and witness breathing. Friday, choose attention, 2-minute shift and attention portfolio. Saturday, intention setting, sentence intentions and ritualize one aim. Sunday, non-attachment, soft release and gratitude for process. You can compress this into daily practices too: morning intention, midday 5-second observer check, evening log. Expanded micro-exercises and everyday experiments. Because this script will be used in long form, let me offer a deep bench of experiments you can run over days and weeks. These are the kinds of small tests that turned my hospital lesson into a discipline I could teach. Traffic experiment. On 3 successive drives, practice the same attention routine. Before you get into the car, take a breath and set a short intention. I will notice what I can control and let go of what I cannot. During the drive, when traffic accumulates, practice the 5-second check, name the observer, and choose recalibration. Breath, soft music, curiosity about the city's rhythms. Record how your subjective experience of traffic changes and whether motorists around you respond differently, more opening, less honking. Over time, you'll notice a pattern. The inner weather often alters outer traffic density in small but consistent ways. Conversation experiment. Enter one planned conversation with a specific attention focus, listening for need rather than evidence. Before you begin, state your sentence intention.
During the dialogue, practice the correctional redirection. Whenever your mind starts to prepare a rebuttal, return to curiosity. Keep a note afterward. What shifted? Did the person disclose something they usually withhold? Did the tone change? These micro-experiments build trust in social fields. Money experiment. Choose a modest financial move you might normally approach with anxiety: a phone call, a payment, a pitch. Prepare with intention and non-attachment. State your sentence intention, do the soft release breath, and pick an alternate route. After the action, record what changed in your feelings and any differences in the interaction. Over weeks, you will see that the energy you bring affects not only your choices, but also how others respond to those choices. Work experiment. At your next meeting, try the relational clean slate with one participant. Offer a short reflective question instead of an assertion. Observe how the group dynamic alters. Practice the 5-second observer check when your habitual role, defender, fixer, moderator, begins to dominate. See whether the group's possibilities shift. Friendship experiment. With one friend, try the gratitude for process conversation. Instead of focusing on a problem, describe 3 ways their presence has shifted your attention over the years. Notice how reciprocal recalibration happens when you intentionally observe generosity. The purpose of these experiments is not to prove magical causation. It is to gather consistent data about how your attention changes relational fields. Over time, the accumulation of these small outcomes becomes the most persuasive evidence you will have. Deepening the testimony. Extended experiments after the hospital. After that hospital room night, my curiosity turned methodological. I carried the experiment into zones that many people experience as stuck: commuting, professional negotiations, and money rhythms. I didn't run quixotic tests. I designed replications. In one extended experiment, I chose a 2-week window and applied the same attention protocol every morning: anchor checks, sentence intention, 5-second observer checks, and a nightly log. I intentionally kept the external goals modest: smoother commutes, clearer emails, one unforeseen kindness each day. At the end of 14 days, the data mattered less than the pattern. Moments of less reactivity increased, synchronicities multiplied in ways that made sense, not fantastical but consistent, and my own internal measure of stress decreased. People around me were not controlled. They simply responded to the altered field I occupied. A manager offered an unexpected deadline shift without prompting. A neighbor returned a favor I had assumed lost. Bank communications contained fewer surprises.
None of these were absolute miracles, but they were predictable shifts consistent with the thesis. When observation changes, probabilities reconfigure.
In another pragmatic test, I ran replicate financial tone checks. I approached a small negotiation over fees with the same intention and non-attachment framework. The result was an offer that surprised me in its generosity. Did my intention guarantee the offer? No, many variables were in play. What changed was the way I navigated the conversation. In particular, my timing, tone, and openness altered the negotiation field. That translated into different outcomes more often than not. These experiments taught me to value replicability over sensationalism. If a practice consistently nudges the field in a predictable direction, you can rely on it as a tool, even if it does not produce a supernatural outcome every time. The work is patient and cumulative, not theatrical. Quantum lag, seeds, soil, and the patience of time. One of the most destabilizing parts of this work for newcomers is lag. You set an intention, you shift attention, and the outer world does not immediately change in the way you imagine. The inner collapse of probability often happens before the visible world rearranges. To make this tolerable and fruitful, we need clarity about what lag is and how to steward it. Think of lag in 3 layers. Layer 1, the immediate micro lag. This is the seconds to minutes window after you change your attention. The nervous system recalibrates, micro interactions alter, and sometimes nothing outwardly different happens. During microlag, your task is to maintain the observer stance, not to demand visible proof. Layer 2, behavioral lag. When observation shifts, other people's patterns may be slow to follow. A partner used to your reactive tone will need repetition before trusting that you are different. Institutions take even longer. This is where practice consistency matters the most. Layer 3, structural lag. These are the systems-level delays, economic, cultural, logistical, that respond only after many cumulative individuals have changed patterns. Here is where collective practice matters, but also where patience and strategic non-attachment are essential. Practices to steward lag. Journal with timestamps. Note the interior shift on day 1, and then track outward signs across days and weeks. Over time, you'll have a visual ledger showing that inner changes precede outer shifts. Set micro goals, not only macro outcomes. Micro goals are process-based. I will observe without filters for 5 minutes twice today, rather than I will get a promotion next month. Process goals keep you aligned during lag. Anchor to rituals that keep you grounded. Breath, water, a short movement, a moment of gratitude. Rituals function as emotional scaffolding through lag. Develop curiosity about delay. Ask, what is this time asking me to learn? Often the lessons during lag are maturation topics: patience, clarity, generosity. Create community accountability.
Share your practice with one person who will witness your process without insisting on outcome. This social tether reduces the urge to abandon the method when visible results lag. Remember, lag is not a failure. It is often the thrum of transformation. The seed must rot before the shoot emerges. Trust is the discipline that bridges the invisible collapse and the visible plant. Collective dimension, how individual observation feeds the field. No person is an island. Your attention radiates. When enough individuals practice conscious observation, emergent shifts at the collective level become more likely. I speak here with careful humility. This is a speculative framing, an invitation to imagine the social consequences of cumulative attention, not a claim of deterministic social engineering. Think of the field as a weather system. A single warm breath doesn't change a continent's climate, but many warm breaths, aligned and persistent, can alter local weather patterns. The idea of a morphic field or resonance is that patterns repeat more easily when similar patterns have been established. If millions of people begin to practice less reactive attention, what happens to shared spaces? Negotiations, policymaking, marketplace trust, and public discourse all subtly shift. The mechanisms are not mystical, they are social. People respond to different behaviors, norms adjust, institutions change incentives. How you contribute. Embody the practice rather than preach it. People notice congruence. When you consistently respond with less reactivity and more clarity, your presence becomes an example that invites imitation. Share microdata, not dogma. Tell a colleague, I tried a daily notice practice and saw less reactivity in my inbox. Practical narratives are persuasive. Create pockets of practice.
Gather a small group to practice observation exercises weekly. These micro-communities become local seeds of different relational dynamics. Practice non-proselytizing modeling. The aim is not to convince, it's to show an alternative possibility with steadiness. Collective change rarely, if ever, shows up as a sudden mass conversion. It emerges through networks of practice, through changes in trust and habit. Your individual practice contributes to the density of possibility available to the larger system. Over time, fields reorganize. Activation exercise, a guided practice to observe the observer now. This is the activation. It is a practice you can do right now, in place. It is longer than the tiny experiments above, but still compact enough to be integrated into daily life. The instructions are simple and interior. You do not need props. Find a comfortable posture, seated or standing. Allow your face to soften. Begin by closing the outer narrative. Notice one thing in the room that is steady. A wall, the floor under your feet, the hum of an appliance. Let it be a quiet anchor. Then bring attention to your breath. Do not try to control it.
Simply sense the inhalation and the exhalation. Notice the temperature at the nostrils, the movement in the chest, the micropause between inhale and exhale. Holding attention on breath is the universal stabilizer for attention. Once breath is steady, shift one layer higher. Notice the noticing. Without changing the breath, ask yourself in the quietest way, who is aware of this breath? Do not answer with content. Instead, feel the presence that notices. You may sense a tone, curiosity, worry, calm. Name it softly. Curiosity, habit, tension. Naming is not judgment, it is orientation. Now, intentionally change the observer's posture. If the noticing voice is tense or protective, invite it to soften into curiosity. Imagine switching chairs. Let the new observer be less invested in proving anything and more interested in learning. Breathe into that new posture. Bring to mind a small, ordinary object, the same object experiment, or a person's face, or a to-do item. First, observe how your habitual observer sees it. Note the story. I must finish this task. This person always leaves. This object is useless. Then, gently switch to the chosen observer, the curious one. Observe the same object again through curiosity. What surfaces that didn't before? Note texture, nuance, the small affordances. Notice the shift in felt tone. Now, set a clear, modest intention for the next hour. It can be as simple as, I intend to notice my reactions with curiosity. State it in present tense and feel how it lands in the body. After you say it, practice non-attachment by letting the intention float a little away from the need for immediate proof. Before ending the practice, do a brief journal note or mental tally. What changed in the felt quality of perception during the exercise? What did the observer notice differently? Write one sentence that describes the felt shift. This activation is both short-term evidence and a calibration move. Repeat it daily for a week and keep a simple log. Even if outer circumstances do not visibly change right away, your internal map will recalibrate. That recalibration is the fundamental currency of this practice. Practical journaling template to track progress. To help the lag phase and to make the inner changes legible, use a simple journaling template each evening. Date and time, one-line intention set in the morning, one sentence about a moment you caught yourself, one synchronicity or small response you noticed, one place where you practice non-attachment, one micro-action you will take tomorrow. This log will become the ledger of subtle transformation. When you look back over a month, patterns will show where practice deepened and where old layers still hold. Resistance and the old story. As you practice, expect resistance. The 5 layers we discussed will push back.
Survival wiring will raise alarms. Cultural narratives will seduce you into predictability. Emotional filters will flare. Autopilot will love its thrift. The belief that one observation doesn't matter will try to render your efforts inconsequential. Meet resistance as information. Ask which layer is speaking. Then apply the corresponding key. A strategy for resistance. Recognize the voice, name the layer aloud. Use an immediate micro-practice from the corresponding key to recalibrate. Log the incident as data. Don't moralize it. Recommit with a single small action. Cultivating community without coercion. One of the most refined skills in this work is building practice communities without pressure. People respond to genuine invitation, not proselytizing. Offer resources, hold witness circles, and practice the 5-second check when you feel the urge to convert. Keep conversations tethered to personal data rather than dogma. Templates for invitations. I'm experimenting with a noticing practice this month. Do you want to try a 5-minute exercise together and share what we observe? I've been logging small shifts after daily intention setting. Would you like to read my log and offer one observation? Notice how these invitations invite collaboration rather than insistence. They create pockets of practice where the collective dimension can begin to accrue. Ethical grounding. Always bind your practice to clear ethics. Do not use these techniques to manipulate or control others. Use them to increase your presence, compassion, and responsiveness. Avoid making claims about someone's health or destiny based on your observations. If practices touch areas of trauma, encourage professional support in tandem with contemplative work. This movement is not about replacing care. It's about complementing it with a disciplined attentional skill set. Long-term habits, from practice to character. What does this look like after months and years? The outward indicators are quiet. Increased emotional regulation, a different cadence in relationships, more frequent alignment moments, and a steadier sense of agency that is not brittle. Internally, the habit of noticing becomes a posture. You feel less buffeted by circumstance and more capable of steering attention when it matters. A simple long-term habit. Once a week, do a field audit. Spend 20 minutes reviewing your journal, listing 3 consistent reactive patterns, and choosing 1 micro-practice to focus on the following week. This periodic audit keeps growth intentional and sustained. Common pitfalls and how to avoid them. Pitfall: chasing dramatic confirmation. Remedy: prioritize consistency over spectacle. Pitfall: spiritual bypassing, using practice to avoid hard emotions. Remedy: pair observation with somatic or therapeutic support. Pitfall: impatient during lag. Remedy: use ritual and community to support patience. Pitfall: weaponizing attention to critique others.
Remedy: cultivate compassionate curiosity and ethical restraint. Final invitation: practice the experiment of recognition. If you have followed to this point, you are participating in a live anthropology of attention. You're gathering your own evidence. The most courageous posture you can take is the posture of a scientist of your own life, a person who experiments, logs, and refines without needing dramatic validation. Before we close, here is one last practical anchor. For the next 7 days, try the following short cycle each morning. Set a sentence intention, do the 5-second observer check twice, and at night, log 1 moment you caught yourself and 1 synchronicity you noticed. Keep it deliberately small. Smallness is the sustainable path through lag. Repetition is the engine of deep change. If you want to use the comments below as part of your practice, do this. After today, return and post which signal from the list earlier you are noticing most. Synchronicity, decreased reactivity, people responding differently, dreamlike fluidity, shifting memory, immediate resonance with certain phrases, or micro-experiments that replicate it. Name the signal and 1 sentence describing it. That single act of publicly naming is a little lock-in. It makes your inner noticing a public witness and increases the chance you'll practice. This is the only additional invitation I make here. Name 1 signal in the comments. I want to close by circling back to what brought you here in the first place, the title. Nothing is random. This appeared because you're about to break through. Treat that phrase as a compass, not a guarantee. Your appearance here is a sign, an invitation, a small alignment. It does not mean the road ahead will be effortless. It does mean your attention has tilted enough to meet possibility. The work from here is patient and steady. Catch yourself, clean the filters, cultivate curiosity, observe the observer, choose your focus, state your intention, practice non-attachment. Repeat those steps, track them, share the data of your life without making grand promises. If you experienced even a tiny shift while doing the activation or reading this, please comment now with the signal you noticed and the word reality responded. When you do, you take a small public step toward making conscious observation an ongoing habit. If you want to continue practicing together, subscribe and return. Consider this channel a kind of laboratory where we witness one another's experiments without judgment. Walk forward with patience. Keep your hands on the small tools: breath, naming, curiosity, intention. Over time, the inner collapses you create will translate into outer rearrangements, and the field around you will alter in subtle but meaningful ways. Remember, nothing is random. This appeared because you're about to break through. Keep watching what you watch. Keep choosing what you choose. The world is listening to your attention.